that, and honored to be a part of your conversations through Zoom, which is unique. I told God a long time ago, I'm like, I never want to be a pastor. And you're never supposed to tell God what you don't want to do, because then he'll put you in places where you actually have to do it. So this is not a sermon, this is a talk. That's my disguise around it. So with that, because I get sick of my own voice, there'll be times I'll probably just pause and hand it over to, how do I reference you? Is it Pastor Scott? What?
Scott is great.
It feels so, okay, I'll try. Hand it over to him to see if there's any comments or questions. And yeah, I'm very honored on this topic. And I really want to be, I'm going to be trying to choose my words carefully in the talk today, because, and I won't ask for a show of hands, but substance use, mental health, affects all of us in one way or the other. And there's some that have a rich history within it, generationally or personally. And so therefore, just please note, I'm trying to approach this topic from really just curiosity and a complete stance of non-judgment. And if anything does happen to trigger anything like that, I apologize. It's not my intention at all. So I'll try going in with that respect right now. Now, so I'm going to focus largely on substance use today, maybe dabble a little bit into mental health and how it relates to Scripture and God's beautiful design, because we're wonderfully and beautifully made. I love that verse. And when we talk about substance use, hopefully that message will come clear through the talk today. So substance use is something I never wanted to get into at all. It's in my when I was studying counseling, doing my master's, no one in my grad class, like when we're asking, like, hey, what do you want to do after your grad class? And they're like, oh, I want to go to psychiatry. I want to go to heroin. No one said substance use and substance use counseling. And when we looked into it, why, there was just this weird factor, a mystery of an unknown that people wanted to stay away from. Now, the unknown was, for example, why would someone use a drug and then see their family disappear, relationships break down, finances break down, health break down, all of it disappear, and then they wake up and use that same drug? It's baffling to the mind, and therefore people avoided it. And now that I think about it, I said another prayer to God. I said, I'll do anything, because I was broke. I had no money. I just finished school. That's what happens. And I was like, I'll do anything. Just don't put me back into Chilliwack. I was studying in California at the time. And don't put me into any kind of substance counseling. And my only job offer that I got, or the first one, was a youth addictions drug counselor in Chilliwack. And so I was like, God, you have a hilarious sense of humor. And I was like, okay, you know what? So I accepted the job. It was a youth counselor. It was actually for counseling for crystal meth, actually, youth that got caught up in meth, and which is a very strong stimulant. And I Google searched meth before the interview, because I was like, I don't know what that is. And anyway, somehow I got the job. Now, with that, once again, I didn't want to go into substance use counseling because it was mystifying. It didn't make sense to me. And therefore, when I got the job, I talked to my supervisor and I said, hey, thank you so much for the job. I just want you to know I'll probably be here for about 6 months, but then I'm going to leave to a different job and I will be seeking other jobs. I just wanted to be upfront. And hindsight, that was kind of rude of me. But anyway, so I met my first youth. She was just a lovely individual. And I was like, okay, we're going to do substance use counseling. I started to get to know her. And in that 1 hour meeting, I met, I'll probably cry just thinking about it. I met the youth behind the substance use. There was no substance use talk. I found the human behind it, the person that God created and was designed to be. I went home, I cried, I gave myself a good kick in the arse and said, oh, I guess I shouldn't say arse over the sermon, eh? Anyways, my filter's gone since the pandemic. And I gave myself a kick and said, no, there's a human there. And I need to study as much as I can about substance use and mental health possible, just to try to understand. And what I learned, and still learning, is a continual curve, is we don't need to talk about substances. We need to talk about relationship. God designed us to be a relational being. We're designed to be in community. We're designed to be together. We're designed to be close together. And then when we don't, bad things happen. And so this talk is more just about relationship, and it really helped me understand substance use because it's a relationship drug. And I'll try to explain that throughout this talk. One thing I'd say is that I see 3 core relationships, and I don't think my wife's on here. She always reminds me there's a 4th, but anyways, God designed us to be a relationship with human to human, just in love with each other, humans and humans. And then human and God, he wants us to be in relationship with him. He does everything he can to try to mend that relationship. And then a relationship between us and nature. We're designed to actually interact with nature, which I'm going to get into a little bit. I like to go to the science behind it. So I'll give a couple of research studies that kind of say how we're designed to be in relationship with each other. And then for the sake of my wife, the 4th relationship is the relationship with ourselves. How do we feel about ourselves? And I won't get into that one too much, but anyways, the other 3 I would like to focus on because they're all 100% correlated to addiction and substance use. So a good starting point is Genesis, the Garden of Eden. So the Garden of Eden is just the most beautiful place, the picturesque, obviously, where God says, Genesis 2:9, he made these trees to grow that were pleasing to the eye and gave great fruit. And then God wanted a suitable partner for Adam, so he gave her Eve, and they had just a beautiful relationship. And they walked in the cool of the morning with God, where they were just in sync with God. So if you look at the Garden of Eden, you see 3 relationships just in beautiful sync: human to human, human to nature, and human to God. Then that fateful day where they chose to take the fruit that God said, don't be a part of. That right there, they broke themselves away from God. They separated, they put a barrier between themselves and God and broke that. And then, not the best move on man's part, blamed God and Eve for the sin, saying, the woman you put me here with, that I feel like it's kind of foolish, but I can't see myself doing anything different. But so he broke the relationship between human and human, and so did Eve. And so they had a break. And then they saw their shame. They realized they were naked. Before that, there was no shame. And therefore, God had to kill an animal, put skin, and put clothing together, separated them from nature. And then this is the biggest part, and this is probably the premise of my entire talk. He kicked them out of the Garden of Eden not to return. Now, if you can picture this, picture the gates of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve taking that one step out. Now, this is kind of the core thesis. Every single step away from the Garden of Eden, there's a direct correlation to increased substance use and mental health. Every single step we take away from a healthy relationship with God, nature, and each other, there will be a correlation, connection to increased substance use and mental health. So that's kind of the premise of all this. Oh, I blew my cover. I'm wearing basketball shorts and a collared shirt. So I thought I could get away with that, but you just saw my knee. Anyways. Okay, so like as I mentioned before, substance use affects everybody. And like in 2002, they just did a study of just how much substance use is actually costing Canada. And at that point, and that was before fentanyl crisis, drug overdose crisis, it was about $40.2 billion it cost Canada, just that addictions alone in all of Canada. And that roughly breaks out to about $1,267 per person. So you're basically issuing a check out for people to use substances, and that can get a little infuriating. And with that, we're not the first generation to try to respond to substance use. Every generation's had its issues, concerns, and try to respond. And there's been a lot of different responses. And please note, this isn't me mocking different responses, but instead we actually have to look really hard at how we're responding to substances. So one of the responses was just ostracize them, keep them away, push them away, and ignore the problem. And we still do this to that day. Look at downtown East Side. Look at our homeless camps. Look at yada, yada, yada. Another one was just say no. Now, when I sit across from someone that's using heroin for the last 40 years and I look them in the eye and say, hey, have you thought about just saying no? That typically doesn't work that well. And it's not like a revelation to them. So that one, I get the intention behind it. However, it didn't work. And then another one that's commonly used is fear-based. I'll give an example, actually. One of my colleagues, he was part of a youth counseling program where youth that got caught in crime he would take them, and then he would send them to a prison that was all arranged, and then the prisoners there would just scare them and freak them out, and then they would take them back home to their town after a couple days, or their home. And the thought was, we're going to scare people into changing their habits. And so sure enough, they get youth caught in crime, and then they go bring them to the prison, drop them off 3 days, pick them back up. Youth would be in a car just sobbing, like just so regretful about the crime. And then after that, they were like, okay, we did our job. We totally did it. We scared them into recovery. And then, want to know the success rate of that program? 100% of the youth that went through that went back into crime. It had a 0% success rating. Now, you need to look at a couple of reasons for that. First off, fear is a short-term motivator. Fear is just, it's short. It's meant to just entice a little bit to get out of that scenario. Love is a long-lasting changer. Love works way better than fear. And so when my colleague, he's a very smart guy, I respect him a lot, asked one of his mentors, like, why isn't this program working? He's like, you did the entire intervention without any relationship. There's no relationship there. All the youth did was they go home and think of scenarios in prison of how they could get around the pain, how they could avoid conflict and try to solve it. They just problem solved it instead of actually changing their core self, because there's no relationship there. So it's pretty big just on how do we include relationship into solving substance use? How do we get back to the Garden of Eden? How do we get back to a community? If I could keep going, or Scott, is there any, just keep going? Yeah, okay. I'll go for a little bit here on just kind of the chemistry behind it. Hey, Chris, good to see you. Okay. So one of the things that really helped me understand substance use is we look at the brain and how it works. So drugs only work on our brains because they augment existing chemicals that are already there. Now, our brain talks through all our different channels and through all different cells through neurotransmitters. And there's several different kinds of neurotransmitters, and there's billions of different neuron connections in our brain that form our brain. Now, it's kind of significant. I wish my daughter was here. She's 3.5, almost 4 months actually. And it's interesting studying the brain because the brain reaches 90% of its adult growth by the age of 3. There's so many neural connections happening every second. It's about 500 to 700 neural connections happening every second for a child. And why that's significant, it's learning, it's developing its brain according to the environment around it to be able to respond and prepare itself for future. So an example is if a child doesn't see light for the first 5 years of his life, it will be permanently blind after that because the brain saw it's not a priority to try to see. There's no point. And so the brain's preparing itself for adulthood and how to survive in the future. Now, the significance of that is, I'll do one neurotransmitter, endorphins. And endorphins they're involved with pain relief, they're involved with joy, they're involved with like reward. And a big one is it's actually a connection from child to parent. It's an attachment. It's like I think Dr. Gabor Mate calls it a love molecule. If I got that wrong, Dr. Mate, just don't email me. So endorphins, they're a relational neurotransmitter. Now, why that's significant is you have this brain developing and it's preparing for the later future life. So endorphins are pain relief. So I'll give my example. And it's not just because my parents are on this call. I think they're on, or maybe they left. They might have got bored. Oh, they're there. Okay. I had a good childhood. I was very blessed to have parents that loved me and were close, and I had a good welcoming environment. So in that, when I would stub my toe, when I would get hurt as a kid, I would be given hugs. I'd be given love. I'd be given nurture and care and sympathy, empathy, those sorts of things. And during that 90% development of my brain, I was developing an endorphin network. So basically after that, when I went off to college, if I got pain, my brain would naturally kick in and give me those endorphins. So I'd feel less pain and feel more joy and comfort. So after this, and it should be noted, physical pain and like verbal pain or any emotional pain light up the exact same part of the brain, which means releases same amount of chemicals if it's physically or emotionally affected. So after this, if Scott like shows up to my house, kicks me in the shins and says that was a really bad talk today, I'll be emotionally and physically hurt, but my endorphin network will kick in and I'll be able to self-soothe. Now, what happens to the child that does not have that environment, that doesn't have the loving attachment figure there to help develop that endorphin network? Then they never really develop it. So that means that child, when they get older, should they feel pain, experience pain, any sort of pain like that, physical, emotional, it doesn't go away the same way it would for anyone that had a good childhood. It stays. Now, I won't do a show of hands, but who here has had a headache that didn't go away after one aspirin or Tylenol? What do? You go for another one. Is there anything less than extra strength, by the way? Like it's all extra strength. Like we want the highest dose, right? So, but what do we do when that pain doesn't go away? We take another remedy. And why that is so significant, and this is kind of one of the big game changers for me for substance use counseling, is endorphins. All right, usually I have a drawing or whatever. Okay, here's a synaptic cleft. Here's two cells talking to each other. Here's a receptor site. So endorphins, a neurotransmitter has to fit that site in order for it to communicate with each other. So endorphin comes in, boom, sends communication, and it gives us pain relief. Now, you look at the opium poppy, which synthesized can be made into heroin and fentanyl, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the fentanyl crisis. And before that, there was a pandemic that happened after that, so we kind of forgot. But even just yesterday, I was getting notifications that the overdoses are increasing at this point, both mostly smoking, actually, heroin and cocaine or meth. But anyways, so why do people use heroin? Heroin actually replicates the neurotransmitter endorphins. It meets on the exact same receptor. Why that's significant is it's no longer a drug problem then. The drug is not the problem at all. It's a problem with pain. People are in pain. When I sit with someone in counseling that's been using heroin for so long, I don't talk about the drug at all. I talk about, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your relationships. Tell me where you had a break in relationship and there's pain. I even had one, he was having a great session. We were doing great. Just for confidentiality, I'll keep it really vague. And he wanted to go treatment so bad, he called his dad to try to ask him he needed $40 a day to go to this treatment center. And his dad just reamed him out for even using drugs, scolded him, and he just started to crumple. And I said, you want to use heroin right now, don't you? He's like, I need the pain to go away. So when I learned that about heroin, it's just replicating a drug that actually was formed through safe relationships. Just like, how do we get back to that Garden of Eden? How do I bring people to a sense of community? When they were starting to bust up and disperse homeless camps, we were really attached to one key one by where the Empress used to be. I don't know if people know that reference, but there used to be quite a big homeless camp there. And we'd go there and make sure they had safety there in relationship. And one day they all wiped them all away and dispersed them. And one individual that wasn't there during that dispersing came back and talked to our staff and just in tears saying, where's my family? Where's my community? You just took away my community. And with that, increased substance use. There was an increase in substance use. One last example, and then I think I'll stop, give a pause, or two actually. Another individual, one day she was gardening at one of our, we have a couple, we house people in Chilliwack and give them supports, and we have a couple places throughout Chilliwack that we do this and try to give them substance use counseling as well. Having a great day. She was in such a positive mood. It made my day. I was talking to her. She was happy. I was happy. And we were at one of our centers and she was just gardening. And then some youth walked by our center. And one youth pointed to the other youth and said, that's where the crazies hang out. And then that lady went and used that day because she felt that pain and didn't have an endorphin network to kick in after that. She sought her own community, fake community, through drugs. So once again, I'm going to say this again, drugs are not the problem. They are not a problem. They're a faulty solution to prior trauma and pain. Are you okay if I stop there, Scott, and see if there's any comments or questions?
Morning, everyone. My name's Shelby. I would just like to to say thank you to my friend Sierra for letting me know about this call. I myself am an addict in recovery. And, you know, just listening to what you just had to share, you know, like, it just makes so much sense, right? Like, drugs and alcohol were never, ever my problem. They were my solution. You know, and I'm grateful today that I can wake up sober and, you know, pray to my God, and, you know, just know that it was an internal problem, right? Like, for me, it was a spiritual problem. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of chime in there. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Shelby, and thank you. By the way, congratulations on your sobriety as well. That's huge. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I'm very
Thank
honored
you.
that you even said that. So thank you.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Oh, gives me chills every time. I love that.
Yeah, great. Anyone
That
else?
is the Garden of Eden right there.
I just really appreciated the correlation you made to, you know, if you have a headache and you take one, it doesn't go away, you just take another one. That was very helpful. For me, I've never done drugs, period, my whole life. Aside from like in the hospital, I've had morphine when I had babies. And I did think, I can see why this has a street value, but
Yeah.
It was very helpful, honestly, because that's where it's at. Like, if we have pain that we can't deal with, what's a person to do? So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, oh, sorry.
One question. So when a person comes out of rehab or whatever program they've been through, what resources are there to connect them to community? Are they on their own, or can we reach out, or how do they get that connection afterwards?
Yeah, and that is a whole topic in itself, and that's actually a really brilliant question, because our funders we have some wonderful funders. So we, as part of our programs, that go through Fraser Health, Provincial Health Services Authority, all these different funders, government funders, and we do a treatment program. And then I say, what happens post-treatment? Because the ideology of sending someone away and then thinking they'll get fixed and come back, what's different? I said, I don't, the treatment isn't the part, it's the community that you need to come back to. That's the key part. So we try to link people to youth groups, to churches, to AA groups, to any sense of community where they're not going to feel judged. And we try. And honestly, this is me being blunt, we have so much room to grow on that, because the thought of a treatment program fixing everything and then returning to the same environment, it will not work. And I'm actually going to get into that a little bit here about the environmental impacts. This is the closest we have right now, but we're opening a new treatment center here in Chilliwack. Have people seen a building being built right behind IHOP? Yeah, so that's a new build. We're gonna hopefully have it open this summer as a youth treatment center for addictions. It's 20-bed resource that can stay up to 6 months. But when I was writing the proposal for that, I wrote in a position saying, we need someone that after they leave treatment can go to their communities, continue to build a community and meet with them afterwards. Because when they leave our door, it doesn't mean everything's done. We still need to get that relationship aspect. So that's a long answer, sorry to say. There's a lot of room to grow on how we still connect people to community and build relationship post-treatment. Because treatment isn't end and start. We're all going through our own treatment in different ways. I don't know if that answered or just made it more confusing.
No, I'm just wondering, is there a way to be a part of the treatment so that when they come, they have a community to go to instead of just, or maybe that is part of the treatment, I don't know.
No, it's honestly, like churches or community groups, anyone, like you do a parking lot barbecue on Fridays and anyone's invited. You do, and just knitting group, you do all these groups. And if you have a philosophy of non-judgment on who joins, what they look like, what they say when they're there, that is way better treatment than I could ever do at any other thing. So just initiate programs, initiate community activities. There's that fund in the city of Chilliwack that if you want to do a block party, they'll pay for it. They'll give you $500-$600. Like, do those things and invite your neighbor that you haven't talked to. Just that alone. I was interviewed by CBC just a couple of weeks ago about providing substance use counseling and services during COVID. And I just kept reverting back. I'm like, no, all we have to do is walk out our door and not have judgment and invite our neighbor to see each other. I know it's kind of weird at this time because we can't see each other too much, spatially distanced, but that alone will help resolve substance use the closer we get to the Garden of Eden relationship. So initiate community activities where there's non-judgment and be creative, because there's so many groups. There's hiking groups, there's knitting groups, there's every kind of group, flower groups, geocaching. Anyways, I digress. I've been told by Rotary that I talk too fast. So if I talk too fast, just go like this. And I'll try to slow down. Maybe Rotary was wrong. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to keep going if that's okay. Okay, awesome. So like I said, the link is just trying to revert back to the Garden of Eden. And so during the Vietnam War, horrific war, and a lot of death, horrible pain, 20% of the US soldiers met the criteria for heroin addiction. And like I said, it's not the drug, it's the pain that they were going through, they were experiencing. Now, upon returning home, so they left the horrific jungle and came to their homes where they had family, they had their community, they had their church, if they attended church, 95% of them quit using heroin at that point. That's a 95% reduction in heroin use, strictly because they went back to their Garden of Eden, or their version of it, their community. So once again, every step outside of that community correlated to increased drug use. I was hesitant to go on to this next one. I just want to give one more example of a neurotransmitter. Another one, neurotransmitter, is dopamine. And dopamine's just lovely. It's involved with exploring, curiosity, reward. It helps you seek food. Like right now, think of your favorite food. I love Coconut Thai restaurant. Oh, their red curry. It's unreal. Right now, my mouth's starting to salivate. So I just got about, if I eat that red curry, dopamine comes in. It just floods my brain and gives me a good feeling. And my dopamine levels go up 50%. I'm trying to see if there's kids on this. I don't think so. If you have a very successful relational gathering with your partner, we'll call it that, your dopamine levels go up about 100%. Now, when you use cocaine, cocaine's a stimulant derived from the coca leaf, that it goes up 300%. That's a lot of dopamine. Now, crystal meth, the most powerful stimulant that I know of to mine, currently will give your brain about a 1,200% increase of dopamine to the brain. That's more than the brain can handle, and therefore stops naturally making dopamine and then becomes reliant on that drug to feel anything. Now, the significance of that is there's no, the joy of relationship is gone because the drug took over the brain. A very quick example of that is I was meeting with this, she's just so marvelous. I really, really appreciated getting to know her. She was addicted to crystal meth. And one day we were walking through Garrison. I like to do outdoor counseling. It just works better than in office. And there's blossoming and there's butterflies. And I'm like, do you see this? And she looks at me, she's like, I see nothing. I'm just thinking of when this session will end so I can use meth again, right? Because her brain, it just would not give its reward anymore because crystal meth had ruined her dopamine system. And then we eventually got her into a treatment program. And she called me one day. She's like, Steven. I'm like, what? Why are we yelling? And she said, I saw a butterfly. I'm like, okay, are you using again right now? Why are you telling me this? And she says, no, Steve, you don't get it. My dopamine is back in. My dopamine's naturally coming in. I saw a butterfly and I appreciated it. And that's where I like how God said we're beautifully and naturally designed. We're just beautifully. We have plasticity, meaning we can get better. We can feel better again. Our brain can adapt. It's continuing to adapt according to the environment that we're in. So God designed us to be quite resilient. Oh, I'm so encouraged by your comments, Shelby. So talking about environment, it's kind of crucial. If you look at the Garden of Eden, everything was bliss. Actually, just total side tangent, but marijuana actually works on the neurotransmitter, and dandamide, what actually translates to bliss. It's just a side fact. So the environment, the Garden of Eden, where everything was actually bliss and together. All relationships were good. God was with them. Animals were with them. Trees were with them. Nature was with them. So when they were studying the 70s, if drugs are addictive or not, they wanted to test that. So what they did is they put a cage, and in that cage they put a rat or a mouse, and they give a water bottle laced with heroin or cocaine, some kind of drug, and then they put a lever, and if they push a lever, they would get either a bit of that cocaine or heroin or whatever. And so they were studying these rats, and sure enough, the rat would push the lever, push the lever, push the lever, push the lever till either it fainted or passed out, or died due to the drugs. And so they were like, okay, there's our proof. Addiction, like drugs are addictive. That's our proof. And then someone much smarter, Dr. Bruce Alexander, who's actually out of Simon Fraser University, I'm pretty sure he's retired. He also doesn't return my emails, so that's another thing. But he came along and said, well, no, look at the life. You have a rat alone in a cage, terrified, touched by humans, and given only heroin. So, oh, Uncle Ron, hey, sorry, I haven't seen him in a long time. He's in Turkey. Okay. So anyways, so what he did is he created something called Rat Park. And if you look it up online, it's really kind of fascinating. It's just, he created in his lab, lots of sawdust, some toys to play with, other rats so they could mate, they could laugh, they could play together, right? And then he got them hooked on heroin, which is pretty weird, but they got these rats hooked on heroin, then put them into Rat Park, and they gave them access to regular water and heroin-laced water. And what would happen is, because their environment was more like the Garden of Eden, they would taste the heroin and never go back to it because they had no desire for it. They stopped using strictly because their environment was helpful. So think of a cage, pain, alone, all those sorts of things. Of course they're going to use. Like, I just almost stopped doing those interviews when they asked about the fentanyl crisis of how people are, 85% say the overdoses happen when people are alone in their apartment. So like, how do we get to the apartment? How do we stop fentanyl? We need to stop fentanyl in the streets. And I keep saying, stop. There will be another bigger drug. And there already is actually out there. And it's not the drug. It's, why are people alone? That's the bigger question. Why aren't we reaching out and developing community ideas to reach out to those people? So it's the cage that's causing the problems. So when I said I'd talk about the 3 different relationships. Another one is our relationship with nature. It's really a fun topic that I really enjoy. And some of the stuff that got me interested in our relationship with nature is, even if you look at dopamine, the happy drug, feeling it helps fight depression, sorry. If you put your hands in soil, this is going to sound weird, but touching dirt, there's a bacteria called Mycobacterium vacci. And when your skin interacts with that bacteria, you actually produce serotonin and a good feeling of fighting off depression. That's why people feel better when they put their hands and feet in dirt. So when I actually have prescribed a lot of my people I meet with, like, go get your hands dirty and don't wash them immediately. You will feel better. Who here feels better after playing with dirt or like gardening? Yes. There's also actually a very interesting fact. 50% reduction in a dementia for older adults that garden. That's a 50% reduction just by gardening. So please go garden. Go walk barefoot. It's actually helpful for you. And when they're studying kids, they had young kids with ADHD. So they were doing all these counseling. And then finally someone said, well, just go counsel amongst the trees. It gave them that interactive play, because God designed us to interact with nature. And just the amount of reduction was fascinating, how much reduced in the ADHD symptoms just by doing counseling outside. Another quick example is, 1900s? Oh, don't quote me on that. There was a flu epidemic that blew up in a certain town to the point where they overcapacitated the hospital. And therefore, they had to put people in beds out in the forest on the property of the hospital. And those that were situated outside with view of trees They recovered far faster than anyone from the flu that was in the hospital. We're designed to be together in nature. We're designed to be in relationship. Two more quick ones. I really like the nature topic, but I'll be quick here. I have a lot of people that have anxiety or panic attacks, and they say, what do I do? And I say, go walk by the better river. And they say, you're a bad therapist. And I say, no, try it. Because in that, basically negative ions, they float around in the air. And negative ions are directly attributed to helping reduce anxiety. And actually, there's some studies that show that they reduce the amount of panic attacks in people. And the highest concentration of negative ions is around cold moving water, which we have the Fraser and we have the Vetter. So if you have anxiety, who feels better after walking next to a river, right? There's a reason, there's a science behind it. We're designed to connect with it. Actually, I'm going to jump off of the nature. I get too pumped on that one, so I'm going to jump off of that one. But if any of you want to talk more about nature and how our brains interact with it, it's amazing. God did a very beautiful thing with us. I'm going to jump to the third relationship of God, unless there's any other comments. That's a COVID filter for you. No, we're good. Okay, I'll keep going then, and then please interrupt me. Jump. I see people are in the chat channel. I'm just terrible at two things at once, so I'll try to check those later. Okay, in the Garden of Eden, walking in the cool of the day. Ooh, negative ions are probably there with God. One of my favorite verses, Galatians 4:6, where it's basically your spirit crying out to God. I think it's like Abba, Father. Like there's this innate desire in us to get back to the Garden of Eden with God in solid relationship, and He'll do anything to get us into that relationship, to the point of sacrificing His own Son to break that barrier. So He wants that relationship so bad. And here's why I love Jesus. When I was exploring other faiths, because I didn't want to blindly follow what my parents taught me. Nothing against my parents, they raised me a great Christian, but I couldn't just do it because my parents said Jesus is real and this is what we do every Sunday. I needed it to be my own. So I explored other faiths, I researched them, I went to all the different temples, tried to figure it out, and I couldn't get away from Jesus, because it's so connected to substance use and mental health. Why I love Jesus, and not just for dying for my sins, because that's kind of a big part too, is when He came to earth, He sought out those that were ostracized and pushed aside. He didn't want us and them. He saw the Garden of Eden possibility on earth and wanted to if you picture the core people here, and we have substance use, mental health, lepers, drunk, all those sorts of things. He wanted to go to the outskirts and bring them in. And that's why I love Jesus. He did it without judgment. People He pestered the most were actually in the core circle, the Pharisees and everyone else, right? But He went to all stops, and He will go to any length to sacrificing his own life just to bring us back to the Garden of Eden. And I just can't get away with that. And that's why I'm fully proud to say that I am a Christian and the follower of God and Jesus, because that's what I want to do. I want to go to the people that are pushed aside. I want people to feel non-judgment and know that they're worthy of love. Forgive this horribly shameful plug, but I have a TEDx talk on YouTube about these three relationships, and it's called Am I Good Enough Yet? So how I view humans is, I think of my kid. My kid's 2.5. She helped me make an omelet this morning, and she put all the spice in one section. It was a really spicy omelet in one section, but she likes helping cook, so it's pretty cute. We had a good laugh about it. And she'll bring us pictures that she drew. She'll bring us a fake food that she prepared. She just wants to show us everything. And the core message the kid is saying is, am I good enough yet? Am I worthy of love? Right? And so, am I good enough yet? And that kid never disappears when we become an adult. We just find different ways to seek it out. Am I good enough yet? Each adult is basically saying, am I worthy of love to you? but it's all unconscious, right? So I want to send that message that, yeah, you are. We're all trying to get back to community in our own ways. And substance use is just, yeah, it's just a faulty solution to prior pain. So I'm going to start wrapping up here, if that's okay, Scott. I just have a couple things very quickly, and it kind of relates to one of the questions that was issued before. What can we do? Well, here's very, very easy takeaways, and then you can do whatever you want with them. Here's 2 quick studies. A major university in the States, a large university, wanted to study empathy. So they had 2 doctors' offices put on site at the school right next to each other during flu season. Now, the doctors were in on this study. So what they would do is they each had a 10-minute window to meet with each student that came in. And when they were given very strict instructions. So a student would come in and say, hey, I'm experiencing nasal pain, like throat, all that sort of stuff, headache. And they're like, okay, you have the flu, drink, have citrus, have water, and sleep, and then it'll pass. So they just gave the same prescription to each person. The only difference is one doctor was allowed to give 1 sentence of empathy. So they come in, they say their symptoms, and the doctor would say, like during exam season, that's gonna be really hard. I'm really sorry that you're experiencing that. And then you'd give them orange juice or citrus and water and sleep. And then they studied everyone afterwards. And those that got the 1 sentence of empathy had their flu leave them about 24 hours sooner than anyone else that didn't have the sentence of empathy, and their immune system skyrocketed. So I really want to pound that point home. By just having empathy, natural empathy, you can change people's immune systems. You can change their well-being. Their brain structure changes just by having an empathic statement. That's 1 sentence. So we always think, well, what power do I have to change substance use? I'm like, just don't go judge today. Just start there. It'll be great. It actually does change brain chemistry. And the other study, which is kind of similar, they're studying rats, rat intelligence. Maybe it's mice, maybe rat, I don't know. I think it's rats. And so a professor took all his students and divided them into 3 groups. And he put a maze where the cheese at the end and a gate in the beginning. And so the rats would run through the maze to get to the cheese. And so you can actually study rat intelligence. And it's actually fascinating. They're called pups when they're born, which is kind of cute. The ones that are licked more by the mother when they're first born have a lower chance of using drugs if given drugs to them later on. They have higher immune systems. It's just that nurturing aspect being in the beginning changes all that. So they're studying the intelligence of these rats. And he said, okay, these are the super intelligent rats. We've been studying them. They're super smart. They just, all I want you to do, don't touch them, don't talk to them, do nothing. Lift the gate, hit start on the stopwatch, goes through the maze. When he gets the cheese, stop, record that time. I'm like, okay, so the super smart rats. Then the next maze, they were about medium intelligence. And the next one, they were the dumb ones, basically. The not so smart rats. So they start, stop, didn't touch, didn't interact, done. And then they brought the results back to the professor. And the professor said, okay, what'd you find? They're like, well, this study's kind of moronic because obviously the smart ones ripped through the maze. The medium ones did okay, and the not so smart ones did terrible. And he's like, well, here's the thing though. Actually, all of those rats studied on the same intellect. It was your perception of what they were capable of that affected their ability to go through the maze. Just by thinking that they were dumb, those rats performed less. Now, this study has been replicated with monkeys, orangutans, like humans. It's been studied over and over and over again because our perception of what people are capable of affects how they function. So when God said, just don't judge, like he meant it. He knew the possibilities of what we're capable of. So anyways, it's fascinating how God designed us and how he'll do anything to bring us back to the Garden of Eden and how we're meant to be in relationship. I don't know if we have time, Scott. I know you have some announcements too. I have a short story here, but I could take or leave it. Instead, just open it up to some conversation.
No, Steve, we've got time. I got a couple messages from people. I could listen to him for hours. So please, you've got time for this story. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you guys are too kind. Okay. Well, I'll briefly This is called The Beauty Within the Town of Elizabeth Lynn. My niece's middle name's Elizabeth Lynn. So it's a short story that kind of captures the relational aspect of drugs. And we're designed to be storytellers. Have you ever, and I'm sure this doesn't happen with you, Scott, but have you ever heard a sermon that was super boring and then all of a sudden they start telling a story, like a real life story, and you perk up again? It's because we're actually we're designed to have oral history, to talk through story. And that's where I think the kid in us comes back out. Scott, I'm sure that's never happened with you. So it's just incorporate stories in yours. So we're going to go back to our childlike brains, and I'm going to read a short story for you. So bear with me here. Okay. This is a story about Elizabeth Lynn, a beautiful town filled with beauty within. A typical town with puppies and roads, except for one thing: the people all glowed. I won't show every picture, but it's basically, there's a light inside of her. She glows. They glowed when they spoke, glowed when they smiled. Handshakes and hugs all brought light to this town. For each time someone was kind to another, this small town would shine brighter and brighter. For you see, each baby born in Elizabeth Lynn began with a small light buried within. From both family and town, all kindness was shown, so that each child's light learned how to glow. As each child grew, so their light did grow too. Later they'd ask, why did I get kindness from you? The family and town people happily let them know, because you're beautiful, worthy, and deserve to go. Warmth, peace, and light grew in Elizabeth Lynn. With all kindness shown, the town did not dim. Until one sad day, that glow did dampen, because amongst the people, bad things started to happen. Some people and townspeople became busy and proud. Money, power, and fighting taught them to worry of themselves. With no one to teach or kindness to show, the light in their children never learned how to glow. I wish I could say the problem there ceased, but with less kindness shown, the darkness increased. People hurt one another, would yell, kick, or shove. Hate took away a glow instead of it growing in love. It was hard to watch. How long would this last? The biggest question left that needed to be asked: what happened to those that weren't taught to glow then, or those that once glowed but had their glow stolen? Their lights did not glow, but rather stayed dim, as if there was a dark hole buried within. They'd see others glow from a distance, they'd stare, feeling empty inside, cold and scared. When having a dim light became too painful inside, they searched for something to help their light shine. They made a fake light, trying to fill the dark hole, then attempted to show kindness amongst those who glowed. Their plan started to work as their fake light did shine, but when their light burnt out, others saw what was inside. Those who glowed pointed and shouted, "Those people don't glow, they're only fake lights, burnt out and I'll show." Those who glowed gasped and stared. They pointed and told them, "No kindness to those not taught to glow or have had their glow stolen." It didn't end there. Those who glowed made a divide. They put a label on those who couldn't glow, labeled dark inside, aka addict. They gave them a label. Those who couldn't glow each received a label. Those who glowed showed no kindness despite being able. Those with a label became lonelier each day and each night. They worked harder and harder at making a brighter fake light. The fake light seemed to work upon their first try, but they all burned out, leaving darkness inside. Those who glowed kept away, and to their children they told, "Those are dark insides, children. Keep away from those who don't glow." So with no kindness shown to those with a label, they moved to the far end of town to make it less painful. Those who glowed sometimes drove by and looked from afar. They point and stare behind their windows of cars. Then one day, a young girl who glowed was playing, kicking her ball, jumping and swaying. Her ball hit a rock, it rolled round and round, it rolled down the hill to the other side of town. The ball rolled and finally did slow, right next to a lady who was unable to glow. She saw the red ball, then the girl with no label. Scared and ashamed, she fled as fast as she was able. The glowing girl yelled after her, "Why are you going?" The lady replied, "We were taught not to bother those who are glowing." "Please come back," said the girl. "Please won't you stay? It's sunny, I have a red ball and I would like to play." The lady with the label stopped on the spot. Was I just invited to play, she thought. Then she turned around, walked over slowly. She had never been talked by someone who was glowing. The little girl giggled and passed her the ball. Then the lady asked, "I'm dark inside. Why do you show kindness at all?" The little girl smiled innocently and let her know, "Because you're beautiful, worthy, and deserve to glow." With that, the lady felt her first warmth inside. No one who glowed had ever been so kind. And it didn't stop there, as her dim light now showed. The little girl had taught her light how to glow. Other people around were completely amazed. That lady was dark inside, but now she plays. They asked the little girl, is this a fake light or show? She replied, nope. She just needed someone to share their glow. Those who glowed were moved by this little girl's actions and finally saw those with labels through eyes of compassion. They saw their pain, their hearts grew soft, and immediately took all the dark inside labels right off. They gathered the people from all around town, and from a high platform they clearly announced all kindness to those who weren't taught to glow then, or to those who once glowed but had their glow stolen. From that day forth, glowing was shared. Dim lights learned to glow through love and through care. Fake lights were not needed, for there was compassion within. Together they all glowed in the beautiful town of Elizabeth Flint. So that kind of summarizes it. It's not a drug problem at all. It's us seeking the Garden of Eden in relationship with God and each other. And just through empathy, through caring, through love, we get closer to that. So I know it sounds simplistic, but it actually can be that simple.
One thing that I have struggled with over the years, talking with other parents, whether they have children who are addicts or not, is that it's easy to give up. Sometimes it feels easier to give up because it hurts so bad and we're so afraid of losing our children. Or we feel like we've already lost them, but I don't believe in giving up. I think that sharing our glow, which, you know, you're the lady in the story, it can be hard. It can be very hard. But just having that little tiny bit of glimmer, you can see it in someone's eyes, and don't give up.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Like, I see you and I just see resilience, and it's very encouraging. So thank you for that so much. And you basically highlighted the one part that I forgot to mention in the whole talk, which is God will provide opportunities for those interactions. And the fact that you're looking for them is stepping towards the Garden of Eden. So thank you so much for your story and your courage too, and strength.
Okay. Hello. Say it again. Hi.
Hi.
My name's Hamish. I've been an addict since I was probably 18, and I've been to probably 15 or almost 18 recovery places. I pretty much learned everything you can learn about addiction and how to be better addict and be a worse addict and all those things. One thing that I heard in almost every place was the opposite of addiction is connection. So without connection, you got nothing. And I've been trying to stay clean for years and years and years. And my parents finally let me come home at Christmas, which was a no-no. Before, I couldn't stop using long enough, so I wasn't welcome home for the last few years. But at Christmas, I went to detox and was able to come home for Christmas. And since then, they've let me stay because I have bad lungs and the COVID thing. But I'm pretty much almost 6 months clean. And it's just because, I've had a couple slips, but other than that, it's amazing compared to what my life was like. I was living on Hastings. I was hustling and using every day, all day for years. And it's really hard to get out of Hastings. So you're right about the family connection.
Thank you so much. And congratulations, by the way. Like, that is so inspiring.
I just have a question for you, Steve.
Yep.
I currently have a friend who's struggling with using drugs right now, and they are not receptive to the relationship that people are offering. They're kind of pushing people away. So I'm just wondering, how can we still kind of be there for them if they're not wanting that relationship?
That's a very good question, by the way, and it's not an easy answer at all, because each person's journey is different. The simple thing is love with boundaries. Mm-hmm. How do you show that you love them, but you have your boundaries in place that protect your own self and them as well? Otherwise, we become too enmeshed. So if, say, I don't know, sorry, mom, I'm using you as an example. If my mom starts using drugs actively, I want her to know that I love her and I will be there for her at any point. And there's going to be situations where I'm going to have to put my own boundary in place. And when she's ready, if she wants to talk at any point, I have every resource already planned, available, and for her pace for when she's ready. So I'm loving with boundaries, and it's easy to say, and I know there's people on this call that say it's a lifelong journey, but at least they're ready, you're not judging, and they know that they love you, and it's their choice. You can't force people away from it. Actually, there's a direct correlation to towns that have higher incarcerations directly correlate to increased drug use. It's just that reinforcing of trying to force people out of addiction. It doesn't work.
Awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you. The word shame, would that stand out to you? Exactly. There's a reason, and I think it was you, Hamish, that said that. You were downtown East Side. And they do all these studies of why do people not leave. It's because that is where they felt normal and
it's comfortable down there.
Comfortable.
You get stuck into a loop and time flies and you get into your own routine and there's no shame down there. Everybody's a big giant family.
Exactly.
Which is
you found a community.
A community of people that kind of care, right? There's no judge. There's a lot of love down there. A lot of people help, you know. I've done stuff that I never thought I would do in the positive way down there. You know, I'd go and pick up needles and do things like that to try to give back to the community I lived in. But definitely for years and years and years, my bestest friends, I'd push away. I didn't answer. I had so much shame. I still have shame towards it because, you know, all my friends are married with kids and have careers and vehicles and all this. And I'm at my house, my parents' house, 34 years old, but I'm alive. So it says a lot more than most.
It's just such a enriching topic, obviously, because it affects all of us in many ways. And there's many more things that we could discuss, like, for example, how Portugal responded to by decriminalizing drugs. And they had 49 overdoses this entire year as a country, whereas Chile had 39 this year, and it's a population of 95,000. So how are we almost matching an entire country? So it's just looking, we're not the first people to try to solve this. It's looking, what are others doing? How are we responding? How are we getting closer, like dislocation, to defragmentization of society? How are we getting back as a community the way God designed us? So there are a lot of cool resources out there that are actively working on this. And I hope Chile, I can say, is so extremely open to new ideas, innovative ideas for responding to homelessness, addiction, and mental health. I know it may not look like that all the time because we have such a crisis, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the background right now.
Kind of wrap up this section. Would you be willing to just pray for us? Just that, again, that we would all grow in just non-judgmental relationships, to be a place of safety and welcoming, and walk with people into wholeness and freedom.
Yeah.
I'd be honored. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for how you designed us and how you love us, you crave us, you want us to be amongst each other. You designed us to thrive in the Garden of Eden, where there's no judgment, no shame, but instead just love and unity with you, with the world you created, and with each other, and the love of ourselves as well, where we can look ourselves in the mirror with pride to see that you designed us beautifully. Show us the opportunities of how we can reach out to our neighbor. Continue to give us strength and resilience through tough times, through our own journey or the ones we love. And thank you that you never give up on us and that you're the perfect example of love. And please help us get back to that Garden of Eden that you created so beautifully. Thanks again, Lord, for this opportunity and everyone here. And may you bless the rest of this day. In Jesus. Amen.